Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was raised in Themyscira by Wonder Woman. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sea was a beast, and it was angry. It was not the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the ocean that 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya had watched from the shore, his small hand tucked safely in his mother's. This was a different entity entirely. A chaotic symphony of roaring wind and crashing water, a churning abyss of slate gray and violent white foam. The small boat, a vessel that had seemed so sturdy and cheerful in the calm Muzurifu Bay just hours ago, was now a toy in the maw of a titan. Rain fell not in drops, but in stinging, horizontal sheets that blurred the world into a nightmare. Thunder cracked overhead, a sound so profound it vibrated deep in Izuku's bones, each clap like the shattering of the sky itself. He clung to his mother, his face buried in the soaked fabric of her coat, his small body trembling uncontrollably. He could taste the salt of the sea and the salt of his own tears. His brand new All Might action figure, a treasured birthday gift, had been ripped from his grasp by the first great wave that had swept the deck, a tiny plastic hero swallowed by an unforgiving reality. "It's okay, Izuku!" Inko Midoriya shouted, her voice thin and strained against the gale. "Mommy's got you. I've got you." She was lying. They both knew it, even if Izuku didn't have the words for the terror coiling in his stomach. The boat groaned, a horrible, metallic scream of tortured steel, before it listed violently. The world turned sideways. Izuku felt a moment of weightlessness, a horrifying lurch, and then the shocking, bone-deep cold of the ocean enveloped them. The water was a disorienting chaos. Inko's grip, however, was an anchor. She fought her way to the surface, gasping, her green hair plastered to her face. Her own small telekinetic quirk, useful for fetching misplaced items or lifting a dropped toy, was utterly useless here. It was a gentle power in a world of savage force. "Izuku! Breathe, baby, breathe!" She choked out, treading water with a frantic energy born of pure maternal instinct. Her eyes darted through the churning waves, spotting a splintered piece of the boat's hull. A large, flat section of wood, perhaps 10 feet long. It was their only chance. With a surge of adrenaline that burned through her exhausted muscles, she swam for it, one arm pulling Izuku along, the other cleaving through the hostile water. She managed to push him onto the makeshift raft. His small fingers, numb with cold, scrabbled for a hold on the slippery wood. "Hold on tight, my love," she panted, her arms hooked over the edge, her legs kicking weakly below. The sea was pulling at her, trying to drag her down into its frigid depths. Her strength was failing. Every wave that crashed over them was a physical blow, stealing more of her precious warmth and energy. She looked at her son. His wide, terrified green eyes, so much like her own, were fixed on her. In them, she saw not just fear, but the boundless trust a child has for their parent. It was a trust she was about to break in the only way she could to save him. "Listen to me, Izuku," she said, her voice now a desperate whisper. The storm seemed to quiet for a moment, as if to listen. "You are going to be a hero. You hear me? You are so smart, and so kind. That's a real superpower. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise." "Mommy," he whimpered, a sob catching in his throat. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know." She reached up a trembling hand and brushed his wet bangs from his forehead. Her touch was icy cold. "But heroes are brave. Even when they're scared. You have to be brave for me now. Can you do that?" He nodded, a jerky, uncertain movement. She took a shuddering breath, the last of her warmth seeming to flee her body. "I love you, Izuku. More than anything in the whole world." With the last iota of her strength, she gave the piece of wreckage a powerful shove, pushing it away from her, out into the relative safety of a clearer patch of water. Izuku cried out, reaching a small hand for her, but she was already slipping away. "Mommy!" Her head dipped below the surface. She fought back up one last time, her eyes locking with his. There was no fear in them now, only a love so fierce and absolute it seemed to radiate through the storm. Then a towering wave, a liquid mountain, rose up behind her. It crested, its white peak seeming to touch the bruised purple clouds, and then it crashed down. When it passed, she was gone. Izuku was alone. He screamed her name until his throat was raw, his small voice devoured by the indifferent roar of the wind and water. He clung to the wood, the world a blur of tears and sea spray, as the storm raged on. Hours later, or perhaps it was days, the storm's fury finally abated. The churning gray sea softened into a deep, rolling blue. The sun, a pale disk in the sky, cast a weak warmth over the lone survivor. Izuku had cried himself into an exhausted, feverish sleep, his small body curled on the wood, adrift in an endless expanse of ocean. He did not see the subtle shift in the current, the way the water seemed to part and guide his small raft with an unseen, gentle hand. He did not feel the benevolent gaze of a goddess from on high, a mother of gods who, looking down from her Olympian throne, had witnessed a mortal mother's ultimate sacrifice and felt a pang of divine pity. Hera's blessing, silent and unknown, steered the child away from the shipping lanes of man's world and towards the protected waters of her chosen people. The air began to change. It grew warmer, filled with the scent of unknown blossoms and clean, ancient earth. A soft, golden light seemed to shimmer on the horizon, and a fine mist, like a veil between worlds, parted for the small piece of wreckage. And then, with a gentle bump, it came to rest on a beach of sand so white it seemed to be made of crushed pearls. The patrol consisted of 5 Amazons, their bronze armor glowing in the morning sun, their spears held with the casual competence of those who had been born to them. They moved with a fluid grace, their sandaled feet making barely a whisper on the sand. They were led by Philippus, captain of the Queen's Guard, her dark hair braided with threads of silver, her face a mask of disciplined authority carved by centuries of vigilance. It was the youngest of the patrol, Lyra, who saw it first. "Captain," she said, her voice hushed with disbelief. She pointed a spear tip towards the piece of flotsam nestled where the turquoise waves lapped at the shore. "What is that?" Philippus's eyes narrowed. Debris from the outside world was not unheard of, but it was exceedingly rare for it to pass through the mists of the magical barrier. Most was repelled or disintegrated. She raised a hand, signaling a halt. "Cautiously," she commanded. They approached the wreckage as a unit, their shields ready, their eyes scanning for any threat. It was then that they saw the small shape huddled upon it. A child. As they drew closer, the impossible, shocking truth revealed itself. "By Hera's grace," another Amazon whispered, her voice tight. "It is a boy, a boy." The word hung in the pristine air, an alien concept. There had not been a male on the island of Themyscira since the time of the great betrayal, millennia ago. Philippus knelt, her warrior's instincts at war with a long-dormant softness. The child was small, perhaps 4 or 5 winters old. He was clad in strange, brightly colored fabric, utterly soaked. His hair was a chaotic mess of dark green curls, and his face, cherubic even when pale and still, was dusted with a constellation of freckles. He was breathing, but it was shallow. He was burning with fever. In his tightly clenched fist, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, was a single, waterlogged piece of lined paper, a child's drawing of a smiling, horned figure in vibrant colors. "He is alone," Philippus stated, her voice devoid of judgment. It was a simple, tactical observation. She checked him for weapons, for any mark or sign of magic. There was nothing. Just a frail, mortal child, delivered to their shores by a sea that should have claimed him. "Lyra, Myrine, maintain the perimeter. Eubea with me. We take him to the royal palace. The queen must see this." The journey to the city was made in a tense silence. The Amazons carried the boy on a makeshift stretcher, their powerful strides eating up the distance. Izuku, lost in a fever dream, occasionally whimpered a single word, a name that meant nothing to them. "Mommy!" The great debate took place in the royal amphitheater, a majestic open-air structure of white marble, its tiered seats filled with the warrior women of Themyscira. In the center, on a simple but elegant throne, sat Queen Hippolyta. Her posture was regal, her face beautiful but etched with the immense weight of her long reign. Her eyes, filled with ancient wisdom, were fixed on the small, sleeping child who now lay on a soft cot before her, tended to by a healer. A male child. Hippolyta's voice resonated through the silent hall, calm but carrying an undeniable authority. "Washed upon our shores. The first to touch this soil since the days of Heracles. The fates mock us with this omen. A murmur rippled through the assembled Amazons. It was not a sound of welcome. It was a sound of suspicion, of deep-seated, generational mistrust. A tall, red-haired Amazon with a fire in her eyes and a warrior's coiled energy stepped forward. It was Artemis, the fiercest of their hunters, second only to the princess in combat prowess. "It is no omen, my queen," she declared, her voice sharp as a flint arrow. "It is a contamination. A breach. The world of men is a place of chaos, greed, and violence. Their strange powers, their quirks, only amplify their flaws. We left that world behind for a reason. This child is a seed from that poisoned garden. To allow it to take root here would be madness. The law is clear. He must be returned to his world, or cast back to the sea that brought him." Nods of agreement followed her words. The trauma of their past was a living thing on the island, a story told to every new generation. Men were deceivers. Men were violent. Men were weak. Philippus, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward next. "He is just a child, Artemis. He carries no weapon, no malice. He is quirkless, our healers have confirmed. He is simply a boy. Frightened and alone, a boy who will grow into a man," Artemis retorted, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her sword. "Will he be frightened and alone then? Or will he bring the folly of his kind to our shores? We cannot take that risk. Our peace is too precious." Hippolyta listened, her expression unreadable. She looked at the child, and a flicker of something, pity perhaps, or a mother's memory, crossed her features before being suppressed by a queen's duty. "The laws are ancient, forged in betrayal and wisdom. Artemis speaks a hard truth." It was then that another figure moved from the queen's side. She was grace and power personified, her dark hair flowing like a midnight river, her blue eyes filled with a compassion as deep as the ocean. Princess Diana, daughter of Hippolyta, stepped into the center of the debate. She knelt beside Izuku's cot, her gaze soft as she looked at his small, sleeping form. "And what of our other laws, mother?" she asked, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tension. "The laws of truth? Of justice? Of compassion? What justice is there in condemning a child for the sins of his ancestors? What truth is there in seeing a monster where there is only an innocent?" She rose and faced the assembly, her gaze sweeping over the hardened faces of her sisters. "Look at him. He is not a symbol of man's world. He is a survivor, a child who has lost his mother to the sea, a tragedy we have all been spared. He has come to our shores not as an invader, but as a supplicant cast here by fate." Artemis scoffed. "A fate that would see us undone, princess." Diana's eyes met the hunters, not with anger, but with a firm, unwavering resolve. "You see the potential for darkness, Artemis. I see the potential for light. We preach of peace and understanding to man's world, yet when a chance to practice it arrives on our very shores, we would turn it away in fear? We would be hypocrites. We would be cowards." The word coward struck a chord, and a wave of indignant muttering passed through the Amazons. Diana pressed her advantage. "He is a blank slate. His heart is unwritten. If we cast him out, we sentence him to a world we ourselves deem corrupt. He may well become what you fear, but if he stays, if he is raised here, among us, think of what he could become." She turned back to her mother, her expression pleading. "Let me be responsible for him. I will raise him. I will teach him the Amazon way. He will learn our history, our philosophies, our skills. He will learn to value truth above all, to fight for peace, and to wield strength with compassion. He will grow to be a man unlike any the world has ever known, a man with an Amazon's heart." The hall was utterly silent. The proposal was radical, unthinkable. A man raised on Themyscira? Taught their sacred ways? Hippolyta stared at her daughter, seeing the fierce, burning conviction in her eyes, the same conviction that had led Diana to leave for man's world decades ago and become their champion, Wonder Woman. She was asking not just to save a child, but to undertake a profound experiment, to challenge the very foundations of their society. Before the queen could speak, the doors to the amphitheater creaked open and the oracle of Themyscira, an ancient woman named Menelip, glided in, her eyes a milky white, seeing things beyond the mortal realm. "A vision, my queen!" she rasped, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. As the child breathed our air, the mists of time parted for me. Hippolyta straightened. Speak, Oracle. Meneleb's blind eyes seemed to fix on Izuku. I saw two worlds shrouded in twilight. I saw a shadow from the Age of Gifts, a taker of power who seeks to become a god of conflict, and I saw the child. He is a son of two worlds, a bridge of flesh and spirit. A hope born from tragedy, who will one day stand against that great darkness. To cast him out is to cast out a chance for the world's salvation. The prophecy hung in the air, heavy and absolute. It was the divine intervention the queen needed. It gave her a reason beyond her daughter's plea. Hippolyta's gaze softened as she looked from the oracle to her daughter, and finally, to the boy. The fates had not mocked them. They had presented them with a choice. The oracle has spoken, she announced, her voice leaving no room for further debate. The child will remain. A collective gasp went through the assembly. Artemis looked stunned, her arguments turned to dust by a prophecy. He will live under your sole guardianship, Diana. Hippolyta continued, her tone firm. He is your responsibility. You will teach him, you will train him, and you will answer for him. He will be an Amazon in all but name and birth. He is a paradox, a son of Themyscira. May the gods guide your hand. Diana bowed her head, a wave of profound relief and gratitude washing over her. Thank you, Mother. I will not fail you. Or him. Later that evening, in Diana's private chambers, a place of simple elegance, adorned with books, scrolls, and beautifully crafted weapons, Izuku finally woke. The fever had broken. He blinked, his large green eyes slowly adjusting to the soft glow of the oil lamps. He was in a comfortable bed, covered by a soft, woven blanket. A tall, impossibly beautiful woman with dark hair and the kindest eyes he had ever seen was sitting in a chair beside him, watching him patiently. His mind was a confused fog, but one sharp, terrible memory pierced through it. The storm. The cold. His mother's face. Mommy? He whispered, his voice small and hoarse. He looked around the strange room. Where's my mommy? Diana's heart ached. She moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her expression gentle. She knew there was no easy way to say this. The truth was the only path, a core tenet of her being. Your name is Izuku, isn't it? She asked softly. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I want my mommy. Diana took his small hand in hers. Her hand was warm and strong. Izuku, there was a terrible storm. Your mother, she was so brave. She saved you. She was the greatest of heroes. She made sure you were safe, and the sea brought you here, to my home. The child's mind, though young, understood the meaning behind her careful words. He understood the past tense. He understood the look of profound sadness on this woman's face. The reality crashed down on him with the force of the wave that had taken his mother. A gut-wrenching sob tore from his small chest. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. He began to cry deep, shuddering wails of grief that seemed too large for his tiny body. Diana didn't shush him. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply gathered him into her arms, holding him securely against her as he wept. She let him grieve, her steady presence a silent promise of safety. She held the son of Inko Midoriya, the child of the unseen sea, and rocked him gently. You are not alone anymore. She whispered into his hair, her voice a vow. My name is Diana. And this is your home now. I will protect you. He cried for a long time, his small fists clutching the fabric of her chiton. Outside, the eternal twilight of Themyscira settled over the island. For the first time in millennia, the sound of a little boy's weeping echoed softly through the marble halls, a sorrowful but sacred note marking the beginning of a legend no one could have ever predicted. Themyscira had a son, and the world had a new, nascent hope. 10 years. On Themyscira, an island outside the normal flow of time, 10 years could feel like a single, sun-drenched afternoon. For the Amazons, immortal and unchanging, a decade was a breath, a pause between heartbeats. But for the boy, the decade was a lifetime. It was the span between a lost, grieving child and the young man he was becoming. It was the crucible in which Izuku Midoriya was unmade and forged anew. He was 14 now. The soft, cherubic roundness of his face had given way to the sharper angles of adolescence. He was lean and wiry, his body a testament to relentless effort, every muscle defined not by bulk but by function. His green hair, still an untamable chaos of curls, was longer, often tied back with a simple leather cord. His eyes, however, were the most changed. They were still the same vibrant green, but the frightened uncertainty was gone, replaced by a calm, analytical depth. They were the eyes of a warrior who saw the world in terms of angles and leverage, and of a scholar who saw it as a text to be read and understood. The sun was high over the main training arena, its brilliant light glinting off the polished bronze of shields and the honed edges of swords. Dust motes danced in the air, kicked up by the swift, rhythmic movements of two figures at its center. "You are anticipating Izuku." Princess Diana's voice was calm, a melodic counterpoint to the sharp hiss of leather cutting through the air. "You are reacting to what you think I will do, not what I am doing," Izuku grunted, ducking low as a practiced sword whistled over his head. He didn't have a sword. He didn't have a shield. His only weapon was the 10-foot length of braided golden lariat coiled in his hands. He was impossibly outmatched, and that was the entire point of the exercise. Diana pressed her attack, a fluid dance of deadly grace. She was not using a fraction of her divine speed or strength, but even her mortal-level combat was a blur of motion that would overwhelm any normal human. She feinted with a low sweep of her blade and brought the pommel around in a stunningly fast arc aimed at his head. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't dodge. Instead, he dropped, his body sinking towards the ground with breathtaking speed. The pommel skimmed his hair. As he fell, he flicked his wrist. The golden lariat uncoiled like a striking serpent, its weighted end whipping around Diana's ankle. He pulled. It was a perfect pancration throw, a maneuver designed for a smaller opponent to use a larger one's momentum against them. Had Diana been immortal, she would have been instantly upended. She was not mortal. Her foot remained planted as if rooted to the very bedrock of the island. The lariat was pulled taut, a golden line connecting the godlike princess and the mortal boy. "Good," she said, her lips curving into a small, approving smile. "You saw the opening and took it. Your technique is flawless." She tugged gently on the rope, pulling Izuku off balance and onto his back in the dust. But technique alone does not win a battle against a superior foe. "What now, little strategist?" Lying on his back, Izuku didn't panic. His mind was already working. Problem: superior strength negates leverage. Goal: create a new variable. Environment: dusty arena, high sun. Tools: lariat body. With a twist of his body, he used the tension in the lariat to swing himself in a low arc, his feet kicking up a huge cloud of dust directly into Diana's face. It was a cheap, simple trick, but it was unexpected. For the barest fraction of a second, Diana's vision was obscured. It was all the time he needed. Izuku released the lariat, rolled to his feet, and sprinted. Not away, but directly towards the training rack at the edge of the arena where a row of heavy bronze shields were hung. He didn't try to take one. Instead, he vaulted onto the rack itself, his movements honed by years of practice, and launched himself into the air, twisting. The sun, which had been behind him, was now directly behind his airborne form, silhouetting him against the blinding glare. He was a dark shape against a starburst of light, making him an impossible target to track for another critical second. He landed silently behind her, the golden lariat already in his hands, and in one fluid motion, he looped it around her sword arm, binding it to her torso. The dust settled. The glare faded. Diana stood perfectly still, her sword arm trapped. Izuku stood behind her, breathing steadily, the end of the lariat held firmly in his grip. The arena was silent, save for the whisper of the wind. "Check," he said softly, his voice respectful. Diana let out a low, musical laugh. She flexed, and the lariat, strong as it was, snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The strands of gold thread fell harmlessly to the ground. "The battle is not over until your opponent is truly defeated, Izuku. But the match is yours." She turned to him, her expression a mixture of pride and affection. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You see? Your mind is your greatest weapon. It is faster than my fists, sharper than Artemis's arrows. You will never be the strongest person on this island. But with a mind like that, you will never need to be. Izuku bowed his head slightly. Thank you, mentor. He looked down at the broken lariat, a flicker of disappointment on his face. I am sorry about the rope. It is just a tool, she said, squeezing his shoulder. Hephaestus can always weave another. What he cannot forge is the spirit that wields it. And yours, my son, is forged of the finest material I have ever seen. That spirit had been tested, hammered, and quenched in the fires of a training regimen that would have broken 100 other boys. Diana's tutelage was the foundation, a holistic approach that blended combat with philosophy, teaching him not just how to fight, but why to fight: for peace, for truth, for the protection of the innocent. But she was not his only teacher. His training with Artemis had begun not with a welcome, but with a challenge. When Izuku was 8, small and still finding his footing, Artemis had found him struggling to string a child-sized practice bow. She had strode over, snatched it from his hands, and snapped it over her knee. This is a toy, she had sneered, her voice laced with the disdain she still held for his very presence. The Amazons are not a nursery for weak male children. If you are to live here, you will learn what it is to be strong, or you will be broken by this island. Come with me. She had led him not to the manicured archery ranges, but deep into the untamed forests of Themyscira, a place of ancient trees and creatures of myth that were kept at bay from the city by magical wards. There, she had handed him a full-sized Amazonian hunting bow, a weapon of yew and sinew that he could barely lift, let alone draw. You will learn to hunt, she had declared. You will learn to track, to move silently, to survive. You will learn the respect a predator must have for its prey. And you will learn to use this bow. You will do it until your arms tear from their sockets and your fingers bleed. Your training begins now. Her methods were brutal. She would leave him in the woods with nothing but a knife and the clothes on his back, forcing him to find his way back to the city. She would make him stand in a freezing river for an hour, learning to control his shivering so he could hold the bow steady. For archery practice, she didn't give him stationary targets. She would throw small clay discs into the air at unpredictable angles, expecting him to hit them. For the first year, he failed. Constantly. He came back from the woods covered in scratches, shivering with cold, his hands raw and blistered. He never once hit one of the clay discs. Many of Artemis's followers would mock him, calling him the queen's pet, or the boy who plays at war. But Izuku never cried. He never complained. He never gave up. After every failure, he would simply nod, his jaw set in a determined line, and say, I will do better tomorrow, teacher. His unrelenting persistence slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to chip away at Artemis's hardened exterior. She had expected him to break, to run crying to Diana. He did neither. He simply endured, and he learned. He absorbed every lesson like a dry sponge. The turning point came when he was 10. Artemis led him to a high cliff overlooking the sea. Far below, the waves crashed against a series of jagged rocks. See that rock? She said, pointing to a spire barely wider than a man's shoulders, 100 yards out. At its peak, there is a small crevice. An osprey makes its nest there. There is an egg in that nest. Izuku squinted, his eyes, honed by years of her training, picking out the tiny speck she indicated. Your task is simple, Artemis said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Put an arrow into the crevice. Do not hit the egg. Do not hit the rock. The shaft must pass cleanly through the opening. The wind is against you. The distance is formidable. It is an impossible shot. Izuku said nothing. He simply took an arrow from his quiver, knocked it to his bowstring, and closed his eyes. He stood for a full minute, utterly still. He was not praying. He was calculating. He felt the direction of the wind on his face, measured its subtle shifts. He gauged the humidity in the air, the pull of the earth, the slight tremor of the cliff beneath his feet. His mind became a whirlwind of physics and instinct. He opened his eyes, drew the bowstring back to his cheek, a motion that was now as natural as breathing, and released. The arrow flew. It seemed to hang in the air for an eternity, a thin line of wood and feather against the vast blue canvas of the sea. The crosswind caught it, pushing it to the left. For a moment, it seemed it would miss entirely, destined to be swallowed by the waves. But Izuku had accounted for that. The arrow had been fletched with a slight spin, and as it lost momentum, the spin corrected its course, guiding it back on target in its final descent. It entered the crevice with a faint thwick that was swallowed by the roar of the sea. It did not touch the rock. It did not harm the egg. Artemis was silent for a long time. She stared at the arrow, its feathered end just visible in the distant rock, then back at the small, determined boy beside her. The mocking smile was gone, replaced by a look of profound, grudging respect. Humph! She grunted, turning to walk away. The shot was adequate. Do it again. It was the highest praise he had ever received from her. From that day on, her training, while no less demanding, carried a different weight. She was no longer trying to break him. She was forging him into a weapon. While his body was being honed into a tool of precision and endurance, his mind was being sharpened in the great library of Themyscira. The library was not a building of shelves and books, but a sprawling, living archive. Scrolls of papyrus and vellum containing the wisdom of millennia were stored in thousands of alcoves carved into the walls of a vast, sunlit cavern. It contained everything from the lost plays of Sophocles to first-hand accounts of the Trojan War, from the philosophical treatises of Plato to detailed anatomical charts of mythological creatures. For Izuku, it was paradise. His innate analytical mind, the one that in another life would have been obsessively dedicated to hero quirks, found a new, far broader canvas. He devoured everything. He learned to read and write in a dozen ancient languages. He studied military strategy, not as history, but as a series of complex, solvable puzzles. He would spend weeks poring over accounts of Odysseus's campaigns, deconstructing his tactics, noting his successes and failures, and hypothesizing alternative strategies in a series of meticulously kept notebooks. These notebooks were his most prized possessions. Bound in soft leather, filled with his neat, precise script, they were the evolution of the hero analysis for the future he would have written, but their contents were vastly different. Notebook 7, Amazonian Combat Analysis. Entry, Philippus, Spear and Shield. Style, exemplar of classic hoplite formation, modified for single combat. Relies on impenetrable defense, the turtle shell, to create openings. Key weakness. Over-reliance on shield's side creates a predictable blind spot to her right rear quadrant. Exploitation, a feint to the shield to draw her block, followed by a rapid, low-arcing attack targeting the trailing leg. Requires immense speed to execute before she can pivot. See Diagram 7.4. Notebook 11, Mythological Threat Assessment. Entry, Hydra. Physiology, serpentine, multi-headed reptilian. Primary threat, multiple attack vectors, regenerative properties, decapitation results in 2 new heads, venomous bite unconfirmed. Recorded weakness, cauterization of neck stump prevents regeneration, ref, the second labor of Heracles. Tactical approach, a 2-person team is optimal, one to act as cutter sword axe, the other as cauterizer, torch, controlled fire source. Isolate and disable one head at a time. Do not engage in open ground. Use terrain to limit its mobility and attack angles. Query: could a sufficiently hot plasma-based quirk serve as a modern cauterizer? Requires more data on the outside world. His greatest intellectual sparring partner was Philippus, the captain of the guard who had first found him. She saw in his sharp mind the makings of a great commander. Every evening, they would sit in the strategium, a room with a massive sand table used for planning battles, and they would play Patia, an ancient and complex game of strategy. You left your flank exposed, Philippus said one evening, moving one of her carved stone pieces to capture 3 of his. Izuku didn't even look at the captured pieces. His eyes were on the other side of the board. Did I? He asked quietly. Or did I offer you a sacrifice to draw your queen out from behind her walls? He moved his own piece, a small, seemingly insignificant one. Philippus's eyes widened as she saw the trap she had walked into. Izuku's move had created a cascading chain reaction that would inevitably lead to the capture of her most powerful piece. It was a brilliant, elegant gambit. Philippus leaned back, a rare, genuine smile gracing her stern features. You see the board 3 moves ahead, always. You do not play to take pieces, Izuku. You play to control the flow of the battle. It is a rare gift. It is not a gift, Izuku replied, echoing the lesson Diana had taught him 1,000 times. It is a skill. It is the product of study and practice, perhaps, Philippus conceded. But the passion for that practice, that is a gift. You will make a fine leader one day. Of all the skills he learned, his mastery of the lariat was uniquely his own. When he was 9, Diana had come to him with a gift. It was not the lasso of Hestia, that was a divine artifact, a relic of the gods that a mortal could not truly wield. This was something new, forged for him by Hephaestus himself at Diana's request. It was a rope of shimmering gold, light as silk but stronger than steel cable, woven with minor enchantments of durability and balance. The lasso of Hestia compels truth because it is an extension of our deepest Amazonian principles, Diana had explained, coiling the lariat into his small hands. This rope has no such power. It is a tool, but any tool in the hands of a true warrior can become an instrument of justice. It will not force a man to be honest, but it can stop his hand from doing harm. It can be a bond to restrain, not a blade to kill. Make it an extension of your will. Izuku treasured it. He practiced with it for hours every day. It became as much a part of him as his own limbs. He could snatch a falling leaf from the air, disarm a sparring partner from 20 paces, or snag a high branch and swing across a chasm. He integrated it seamlessly into his combat style, using it for captures, trips, disarms, and even as a makeshift whip. It was the perfect weapon for him, versatile, precise, and non-lethal. It was the answer to the question of how a quirkless boy could stand among giants. But for all his training, for all his skills, there was a part of him that was always separate. He was loved, especially by Diana, who was in every sense his mother. He was respected by Philippus, Artemis, and most of the senior warriors. But to many of the other Amazons, he remained a curiosity, an anomaly. He was the only boy they had ever known. He was the only one who aged as mortals did, a constant, visible reminder of the fleeting nature of the world they had left behind. When he walked through the communal dining hall, conversations would sometimes falter. He would feel the weight of their stares, not always hostile, but always othering. He learned to live with it. He learned to be unfailingly polite, to speak with a formal respect that was both genuine and a defense mechanism. He learned to be self-sufficient, never asking for help unless it was absolutely necessary. He understood that his place on the island was a privilege, not a right, and he worked every single day to be worthy of it. One afternoon, while he was mending a fishing net near the shore, a mundane task he found meditative, a group of younger Amazons passed by. One of them, a girl named Clymene with a proud, sharp tongue, stopped. "Look," she said to her friends, loud enough for him to hear. "The little mortal plays with string. Perhaps he will catch us a fish for dinner." Her friends giggled. The Izuku of 10 years ago might have flushed with shame or anger. The 14-year-old Izuku simply continued his work, his fingers moving deftly, tying a perfect fisherman's knot. "It is an important task, Clymene," he said without looking up, his voice even and calm. "The nets feed the city. There is honor in all work that serves the whole." His simple, earnest sincerity completely disarmed her. She had been expecting a fight, or at least a wounded retreat. She was met with the core philosophy of her own people, spoken by the one person who wasn't truly one of them. She flushed, mumbled something under her breath, and hurried away with her friends. Izuku finished the knot and looked out at the sea. It was calm today, a vast sheet of turquoise and gold under the setting sun. It was the same sea that had taken his first mother, and the same sea that had delivered him to his second. It was a thing of chaos and creation, of sorrow and salvation. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Diana, who had been watching from a distance. "That was well handled," she said, sitting beside him on the warm sand. "Her words were not meant with true malice," Izuku replied. "They come from confusion. It is hard to hate something you do not understand, but it is easy to fear it." Diana looked at him, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "You have so much wisdom for one so young." "I have had good teachers," he said, a small, genuine smile finally gracing his lips. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves. "Do you ever wonder?" Diana asked softly. "About the world you came from? The world of your birth mother?" Izuku's gaze grew distant. He nodded slowly. Every day. I see the drawings of the heroes I made as a child. You saved them for me. I read the scrolls in the library about the rise of quirks. I know it is a world of incredible powers and great conflict. He paused, looking down at his own hands. And I know that I was born without power in a world defined by it. I was born quirkless. What you were born with is not what defines you, Izuku, Diana said, her voice firm. That is the lesson of this island. We were born women in a world that saw us as chattel. We made our own strength. You were born without a quirk, so you have made your own power through sweat, will, and intellect. There is more honor in that than in any power that is simply given. He looked at her, his green eyes shining with emotion. I know. But I still wonder. My first mother told me I could be a hero. Do you think she would be proud of who I am now? Diana wrapped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. She rested her cheek on the top of his head, her own immortal heart aching with the mortal boy's question. Izuku, she whispered, her voice thick with absolute conviction. She would not just be proud. She would be in awe. He leaned against her, the strong, steady presence that had been his anchor for a decade. He was a son of Themyscira, a warrior, a scholar. He was a paradox, a living bridge between two worlds. He was strong, he was ready. And though he did not know it, the world of his birth was on the verge of crying out for a hero, and the fates were preparing to call him home. It began as a tremor in the very soul of the island. There was no earthquake, no physical shift of the earth. It was a discordance in the perfect, timeless harmony of Themyscira. On the training grounds, a dozen sparring matches faltered as the Amazons felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. In the groves, the eternal song of the cicadas and birds fell silent, a sudden, unnatural hush descending upon the ancient trees. The air, usually sweet with the scent of salt water and hibiscus, grew thin and sharp, carrying a metallic tang like ozone and old blood. Izuku was in the great library, meticulously copying an ancient text on Athenian naval formations, when the feeling washed over him. It was a wave of pure psychic nausea, a profound sense of wrongness that made the hairs on his arms stand up and a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. The flame in the oil lamp beside him flickered wildly, casting dancing, distorted shadows on the cavern walls. For a horrifying instant, the shadows seemed to take on monstrous shapes, things with too many limbs and gaping, silent maws. He looked up, his hands stilling over the papyrus. He was mortal, his senses duller than those of his immortal caretakers, yet he felt it keenly. It was an invasive, malevolent energy, utterly alien to the life-affirming aura of the island. It felt like a disease, a creeping rot seeping through a crack in the world. Across the island, the reaction was instantaneous. Philippus, overseeing the city's watch, barked orders, her voice sharp as steel. Archers materialized on the ramparts, their bows drawn, their eyes scanning the shimmering, misty barrier that separated their world from the outside. Artemis, who had been tracking a chimera in the high peaks, froze, her hand dropping to the hilt of her hunting knife as she tasted the corruption on the wind. The epicenter of the disturbance was the barrier itself. That shimmering, golden veil of magic, woven by the goddesses to hide and protect Themyscira, was flickering. For the first time in centuries, its light wavered, dimming and pulsing like a dying star. A thin, spiderweb crack of violet-black energy sizzled across its surface before the golden magic surged and healed the breach. But the damage was done. A whisper of the outside world, a foul and hungry whisper, had slipped through. At the royal palace, Queen Hippolyta stood on her balcony, her hand resting on the marble railing, her knuckles white. She looked towards the barrier, her ancient eyes narrowed. Beside her, Diana had materialized, her expression grim. "What was that?" Diana asked, her voice low and tense. "A wound," Hippolyta answered, her voice like the grinding of stones. "Something from man's world has grown powerful enough to touch the divine protections of this island. A power of profound malice." Before another word could be spoken, a gasping cry echoed from the direction of the Temple of the Fates. Both women turned, their warriors' instincts taking over. They moved as one, their long strides covering the distance in moments. They found the oracle, Menelip, collapsed on the floor of her sanctum. Two priestesses were trying to help her, but she thrashed and writhed as if in the grip of a seizure. Her milky white eyes were rolled back in her head, and a low, guttural moan escaped her lips. "Give her space!" Diana commanded, kneeling beside the ancient seer. She took Meneleb's hand. It was as cold as marble. "It is not a sickness of the body," Hippolyta said, her gaze fixed on the oracle. "It is a vision. One so powerful it threatens to tear her mind apart." As if hearing the queen's words, Meneleb suddenly went rigid. Her back arched, and she levitated a few inches from the floor, held aloft by an unseen force. When she spoke, her voice was not her own. It was a chorus of voices, male and female, young and old, echoing with the weight of prophecy. "The shield cracks. The age of miracles dies." The voice boomed through the temple, a sound that vibrated in their very bones. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of burning herbs and destiny. "A shadow from the age of gifts rises anew. A god of conflict, a taker of power, casts his pall over the mortal realm. He amasses souls and abilities, a king of ruin who seeks to unmake the world of men." Diana's breath hitched. A taker of gifts. In the context of the outside world, she knew what that meant. She had read the modern histories Izuku had so painstakingly compiled from the few fragmented texts that washed ashore. Gifts, in this new age, were quirks. A taker of quirks. The description was chillingly specific. It was then that Izuku arrived, breathless from his run from the library. He skidded to a halt at the temple entrance, his eyes wide with alarm. He saw the levitating oracle, felt the oppressive energy in the room, and understood this was the source of the feeling that had disturbed him. The oracle's head swiveled, her blind eyes seeming to fix directly on him. The chorus of voices softened, focusing into a single, resonant tone. "The balance falters. The great pillar that holds up the sky begins to crumble, eaten from within. When it falls, chaos will reign. The son of two worlds, the bridge of flesh and spirit, must return to the land of his birth." Every eye in the room, Diana's, Hippolyta's, the priestess's, fell upon Izuku. He felt 100 tons of pressure settle on his shoulders. The son of two worlds. There was no one else that could describe. He was rooted to the spot, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a great darkness rises that not even the gods can ignore. He must stand with the fading light, for only then can the world be saved from the coming night. It is fated. It is written. With a final, shuddering gasp, Meneleb fell back to the floor, the energy leaving her. She was unconscious, but breathing peacefully. The oppressive atmosphere in the temple vanished, leaving behind a silence more profound and terrifying than the prophecy itself. Izuku stood in the doorway, trembling slightly. Return to the land of his birth. Stand with the fading light. He felt like a boy again, lost on a piece of wreckage in a vast, storm-tossed sea. Later, in the queen's private solar, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Izuku sat on a cushioned bench, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, while Hippolyta paced before a large, ornate scrying pool, a basin of polished black obsidian filled with silvery, shimmering water. Diana stood beside it, her face a mask of deep concentration. "A god of conflict, a taker of gifts," Hippolyta mused, her voice grim. "Such beings have not walked the earth since the darkest days of the ancient myths." "The world has changed, mother," Diana said softly. "Their myths are new. They call them quirks. And this taker, he sounds like the boogeyman from their modern histories." A figure of the underworld named All for One. She dipped her hand into the silvery water. "Show me this shadow," she commanded. "Show me the fading light the oracle spoke of." The water swirled, the silver liquid darkening. Images began to form, not clear like a reflection, but fragmented, impressionistic, like a half-remembered nightmare. Izuku watched, captivated and horrified. He saw a brief, flickering image of a man in a dark, impeccable suit, his face obscured by shadows and a strange, skull-like breathing apparatus. He saw the man's hand reach out, glowing with a malevolent red energy, and touch a terrified young hero. He watched as the light in the hero's eyes died, his powerful quirk, the ability to generate brilliant beams of light, sputtering out and being drawn, like a ribbon of energy, into the dark man's palm. The man chuckled, a sound that scraped at the soul, and a moment later, a beam of identical light erupted from his own fingertips. "A taker of gifts." The prophecy made flesh. Then the image shifted. The pool showed a bustling, futuristic city of gleaming glass and steel, a city Izuku recognized instantly from his old drawings and the geography scrolls. Miyazudafu, Japan. His birthplace. And there, standing amidst the chaos of a villain attack, was a figure of impossible scale. A giant of a man with golden hair shaped like twin horns, a smile carved onto his face that seemed to hold back the darkness of the entire world. He was a colossus of muscle and optimism, his presence a literal beacon of light. All Might. Izuku breathed, the name feeling strange and familiar on his tongue. It was the hero from his faded childhood drawing, the one he had clutched as his mother was lost to the sea. The image in the pool glorified him. It showed him saving hundreds in a single bound, his laughter booming as he held up a collapsing bus. He was everything a hero was supposed to be. A symbol. Diana, who knew the power and the burden of being a symbol, watched with a critical, knowing eye. But then, the scrying pools showed her what the world did not see. The image flickered again, showing the same man, alone, in a dark alleyway. A cloud of steam erupted from his body, and the golden colossus deflated. In his place was a skeletal, emaciated figure, his eyes sunken, his blonde hair hanging lank around his hollowed-out cheeks. He coughed, a racking, painful sound, and when he pulled his hand away from his mouth, it was stained with blood. The fading light. The crumbling pillar. The images in the pool dissolved back into shimmering silver. The solar was silent. Izuku stared at the water, his mind reeling. The hero of his earliest memories, the number one hero in the world, was secretly broken. Wounded. Dying. Diana finally spoke, her voice heavy with a dawning horror. I was wrong, she whispered, looking at her mother. I left man's world believing they had found their own champions, their own way to peace. But this peace is a lie. It is a beautiful house built on a single, cracking foundation. It rests entirely on the shoulders of one man, and that man is breaking. She looked at Izuku, her expression filled with a terrible sorrow. And the monster that broke him is still out there, gathering power in the shadows. That night, Izuku could not sleep. He sat in his chambers, the room he had known for a decade, but it suddenly felt alien to him. The prophecy echoed in his mind. The son of two worlds must return. He walked over to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. He lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst his spare lariats and whetstones, were the few pathetic remnants of his past life, preserved by Diana. A small, worn t-shirt with the words t-shirt printed on it. A pair of scuffed red sneakers that would barely fit his hand now. And at the very bottom, carefully pressed between two sheets of parchment, was the drawing. It was a crayon drawing, faded and water-damaged around the edges, the work of a 4-year-old hand. It depicted a towering, smiling figure with V-shaped hair, his fist raised in victory. In the corner, a smaller stick figure with a mop of green hair looked up at him with admiration. He traced the outline of the smiling hero with his finger. This was the man in the pool. The pillar. The one who was secretly bleeding in alleyways, coughing up his life to maintain the peace. He heard a soft footfall and looked up to see Diana standing in the doorway, her form silhouetted by the light from the hallway. I could not sleep either, she said softly, walking in and sitting on the edge of his bed. This whole time, Izuku began, his voice barely a whisper. I've been training. I learned to fight, to think, to be strong. I thought it was to prove I belonged here. To be worthy of the home you gave me. He looked from the drawing to her, his green eyes shining with a new, terrifying clarity. But that wasn't it, was it? All this time. I was being prepared for this. Diana did not deny it. Perhaps the fates have a longer thread than any of us can see. I trained you to be a good man, Izuku. A hero. I just did not know where your battlefield would be. Izuku stood up, his movements filled with a sudden, desperate energy. He strode over to her, the drawing clutched in his hand. I have to go, he said, his voice firm, all traces of fear replaced by a startling resolve. Diana, you have to let me go. This was not the pleading of a child asking for permission. This was the declaration of a young man who had found his purpose. The oracle's words, your vision in the pool, it all makes sense, he continued, his words tumbling out in a rush of analytical passion. This all-for-one is a strategic threat of the highest order. He doesn't just defeat his enemies, he consumes them, adding their strength to his own. He is an ever-escalating force. And All Might is the only one who can hold him back, but he is a finite resource. He is burning out. It's a war of attrition, and he is losing. He paced the room, his mind, honed by years of study with Philippus, dissecting the problem. To defeat such an enemy, you cannot just meet strength with strength. You need a new variable. Something unexpected. The prophecy called me a bridge. It said I had to stand with the fading light. It means me. A quirkless boy with Amazonian training. I am the one thing All-for-One could never predict. He stopped in front of her, his eyes blazing. My mother, my first mother, she died to get me here. She died so I could live. I cannot honor her sacrifice by staying in this paradise while her world, my world, is about to be consumed by darkness. To be a hero, it's the only thing I've ever truly wanted. She knew it. You taught me how to be one. Now I have to go and be one. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of fierce determination and pleading vulnerability. Please, Diana. Don't try to protect me from this. This is my fight. I feel it. In my bones. I have to go. Diana looked at the young man standing before her. He was not the small, terrified child she had pulled from the sea. He was her son, her student, her legacy. He was wise, compassionate, and brave. He was ready. And in her heart, she knew he was right. To keep him here would be to cage him, to deny the very purpose for which he had been forged. She rose and placed her hands on his shoulders. You are right, she said, her voice filled with a mother's pride and a mother's pain. Your place is there. But you will not go alone. A look of confusion crossed Izuku's face. But the prophecy spoke of your role, not mine. She interrupted firmly. I have seen a glimpse of this world you are returning to. It is a place of wonders, but also of deep cynicism and deception. You have a pure heart and a warrior's skill, Izuku, but you do not know their ways. You are not ready for the poison of their world. I am your mentor, and I am your mother. My place is by your side. The farewell took place at dawn on the very same beach where Izuku had first washed ashore. The sand was cool beneath his new boots. Nearly the entire population of Themyscira had gathered in a solemn, silent assembly to see them off. Queen Hippolyta stood before him, her regal expression softened by a rare display of emotion. In her hands she held 2 items. 10 years ago, the sea brought us a child, she said, her voice carrying over the gentle sound of the waves. Today, a young man leaves us. A warrior of our own making. She held out a set of bracers. They were forged from Amazonium, a celestial bronze alloy, shimmering with a soft, silver-gold light. They were modeled after Diana's own, though simpler in design, etched with elegant, swirling patterns. These are the vambraces of Aegis, Hippolyta said, her voice resonating with gravitas. They are a symbol of our people. They are not merely armor, but a declaration. They say that the hands they protect are used for defense, not aggression. That your strength will be a shield for the weak. Wear them with honor. Izuku held out his arms, and Hippolyta fastened the bracers around his forearms. They were cool to the touch and hummed with a faint, latent energy. They felt like a part of him. Next, she presented him with a cuirass of treated leather and lightweight Amazonian plates, designed to be worn under his tunic. It was strong enough to turn a blade or a bullet, yet light enough not to impede his acrobatic fighting style. This will protect your heart, she said, her gaze intense. The one in your chest, and the one you carry in your spirit. Do not let the cruelty of man's world harden it. She then placed a hand on his cheek, a gesture of unexpected grandmotherly affection. The shadow you hunt has deep roots. It reaches back to the age of myths. Be vigilant, my grandson. Izuku bowed his head, overwhelmed. Thank you, my queen. I will not fail you. He looked out at the assembled Amazons. He saw Philippus, who gave him a sharp, approving nod. He saw many of the others, their expressions a mixture of pride, concern, and awe. And he saw Artemis. She stood apart from the others, her arms crossed. She did not smile, but as his eyes met hers, she dipped her head in a minute, almost imperceptible gesture of respect. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. Diana, clad in her own iconic armor, stepped forward and took his hand. "It is time." She led him towards the water's edge. There was nothing there. "How are we?" Izuku began. Diana smiled and touched a large, smooth rock at the waterline. A shimmering distortion appeared in the air before them, like heat haze on a summer road. The air wavered, and then, impossibly, a vehicle resolved out of thin air. It was a sleek, beautiful aircraft, its canopy and fuselage completely transparent, blending perfectly with the sky and sea behind it. The invisible jet. A ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Izuku took one last look at the white sand beaches, the marble city gleaming in the morning sun, the faces of the women who had raised him. This was the only home he had ever truly known. He turned and walked up the ramp into the aircraft, not looking back again. Diana followed, and the ramp retracted. The canopy sealed, and the jet shimmered, once again vanishing from sight. Inside the cockpit, Izuku stared out at the island as the jet silently rose into the air. He was leaving a world of myth and magic, a literal paradise, and flying towards a world of superheroes and supervillains, a world teetering on the brink of chaos. He was terrified. He was exhilarated. He placed his hands on his new bracers, the cool metal a comforting weight. He was the son of Inko Midoriya, who gave him life. He was the son of Diana of Themyscira, who gave him a purpose. He was a quirkless boy armed with the skills of a legendary warrior race. He was heading home. The transition from the world of gods to the world of men was not gradual. It was a violent, sensory assault. The invisible jet, having passed through the shimmering magical barrier of Themyscira, descended through the clouds over Muzurufu, Japan. Izuku pressed his face against the transparent canopy, his eyes wide, trying to process the impossible vista below. He had studied maps. He had read descriptions in ancient and modern texts. He had seen the fleeting, dreamlike images in the scrying pool. None of it had prepared him for the reality. Themyscira was a city of white marble, of flowing organic lines that worked in harmony with nature. Muzurufu was a riot of steel and glass, a chaotic forest of geometric towers that clawed at the sky, each one vying for dominance. The air, which on the island had been pure and scented with flowers, was thick here, a complex cocktail of exhaust fumes, street food, and the faint, ever-present smell of hot asphalt. But it was the noise that struck him most. On Themyscira, the loudest sounds were the clash of training swords, the cry of a hawk, or the roar of the sea. Here, a cacophony rose to meet them. A billion discordant sounds blended into a single, overwhelming hum. The blare of horns, the distant wail of sirens, the rumble of trains on elevated tracks, the indecipherable chatter of a million voices, the relentless thrum of technology. It was the sound of a world that never, ever slept. "It is loud," Izuku said, his voice barely a whisper. He felt a tremor in his hands, a nervous energy that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with overstimulation. "This is their normal, Izuku," Diana said from the pilot's seat beside him. Her own senses were far more acute than his, and while she maintained a serene composure, he could see the slight tension in her jaw. She had visited this world before, but decades had passed. It had grown louder, faster, more crowded. "It is the sound of life, of progress, of chaos. You must learn to find the signal within the noise." They landed in a secluded, wooded park on the outskirts of the city, the jet's cloaking technology holding perfectly. Diana had arranged for a small, unassuming apartment under a pseudonym, a base of operations from which they could observe and plan. Their clothing was the first and most immediate challenge. Their Amazonian attire, practical and timeless on the island, would make them stand out like figures from a history book. Diana had prepared for this, creating simple, modern tunics and trousers from their own looms. But even these seemed strangely formal. Walking through the streets of Muzurufu for the first time was a disorienting, humbling experience for Izuku. He, who could track a deer through a dense forest by the scent of a broken twig, felt clumsy and lost. People flowed around him like a river around a stone, a rushing torrent of bodies and faces. Everyone was staring at small, glowing rectangles in their hands, their thumbs flying across the surfaces. Brightly colored advertisements with impossibly cheerful faces screamed at him from towering digital billboards. Strange, wheeled metal carriages, Cars, he reminded himself from his studies, rushed past with terrifying speed and noise. His formal Themysciran upbringing was a stark contrast to the casual rush of the city. He found himself bowing his head slightly to everyone he passed, a gesture of respect that was met with confused or amused glances. A child dropped an ice cream cone and began to cry. Izuku instinctively moved to help, only to have the mother snatch the child's hand and hurry away, casting a suspicious look at the strangely dressed young man with the intense eyes. "Do not take it to heart," Diana advised, her hand resting reassuringly on his shoulder. "They are not accustomed to such open sincerity. In a world with so many people, a degree of caution and distance becomes a form of armor." It was on their second day, as they were navigating a crowded underpass, that the world shifted. A deep, guttural roar echoed from the street above, followed by the sound of twisting metal and panic screams. The ground trembled. People in the underpass gasped, their heads snapping up. Their glowing rectangles were suddenly pointed towards the exit, and a chorus of excited, fearful murmurs rippled through the crowd. "A villain attack!" someone shouted. Diana and Izuku exchanged a look. This was it. Not a drill, not a prophecy. The reality of this world's conflict, live and in person. "Stay here," Diana said, her voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone of a field commander. "Observe. Analyze. Do not engage unless there is no other choice." Izuku nodded, his heart beginning to pound a steady, powerful rhythm against his ribs. He felt no fear, only a profound, electric focus. All his training, all his study, was converging on this single moment. They emerged from the underpass into a scene of chaos. A massive, amorphous creature made of green, viscous sludge was rampaging down the street. It had the vague shape of a man, with two huge, manic eyes and a grotesquely wide mouth floating within its gelatinous body. It was laughing, a horrible, gurgling sound, as it smashed cars and tore down streetlights. Heroes were already on the scene. The punching hero, Death Arms, was trying to corral civilians. The wooden hero, Kamui Woods, was using his lacquered chain prison to evacuate people from a collapsing bus, but none of them could get close to the villain. He was too fluid, too unpredictable. Then Izuku saw it. Trapped within the swirling vortex of the sludge villain's body was another boy, perhaps Izuku's age. He had spiky ash-blonde hair and was thrashing violently, small, powerful explosions erupting from his palms. The villain was using the boy's body as a shield and his quirk as a weapon, firing off uncontrolled blasts that kept the other heroes at bay. Izuku's mind, the analytical engine honed in the Great Library and on the training grounds, went into overdrive. Target, sludge villain. Composition, liquid or semi-solid. Conventional physical attacks likely ineffective. Current hostage, male, adolescent. Quirk, explosive, emanating from hands. A liability and a weapon. Hero assessment, Death Arms, strength-based, ineffective against a fluid opponent. Kamui Woods, wood manipulation, is a fire hazard against the hostage's quirk. Backdraft is focused on containment. No hero present has an appropriate ability set. He watched the trapped boy's struggles. His explosions were growing weaker. His face was a mask of fury and desperation, but Izuku saw something else in his eyes, terror. He was suffocating, and then their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, across the chaos of the battlefield, Izuku's analytical green eyes locked with the panicked red eyes of the hostage. In that moment, the boy wasn't a variable in a tactical problem. He was a person. A person who was going to die. The memory of his mother's face, disappearing beneath the waves, flashed through his mind. A hero is brave, even when they're scared, he didn't think. For the first time in 10 years, he let his body move on pure, unadulterated instinct. He broke from the crowd and ran. "Izuku!" Diana's voice was a sharp cry, but he didn't hear it. The heroes shouted at him. "Get back here, kid! It's too dangerous!" But Izuku wasn't a kid. He was a warrior of Themyscira. And he wasn't running in blindly. His instinct was guided by a decade of relentless training. As he sprinted, his mind re-engaged, processing the environment at a speed no normal person could. Analysis. Villain's weak points are his eyes. They are solid components within the fluid mass. Hostage is a danger, but also a distraction. Environment, debris on the street. A discarded student's backpack, fire hydrant nearby. He didn't have his lariat. He didn't have his bracers, which were hidden under his long-sleeved tunic. He had nothing but his mind and his body. He reached down without breaking stride and scooped up the heavy canvas backpack. He spun, a perfect discus throw motion learned from studying ancient Olympian athletes, and hurled the bag. It flew with pinpoint accuracy, not at the villain, but at his larger left eye. The villain roared in surprise and pain as the bag, filled with heavy textbooks, struck its mark. The fluid around the eye recoiled, and for a single, crucial second, the villain's concentration on the hostage wavered. It was the opening. Izuku didn't stop. He vaulted over a crumpled car door, his movements fluid and efficient. The trapped boy, in that moment of distraction, managed to force his head up, gasping for air. His name was Katsuki Bakugo, and in that instant, he saw the face of his rescuer. A boy he hadn't seen in 10 years. A useless, quirkless weakling he had once called Deku, and he was running towards the monster. Izuku reached the villain. He didn't try to punch him. He didn't try to pull Bakugo out. He started clawing desperately at the sludge around Bakugo's face, trying to clear an airway. His fingers sank into the foul-smelling slime. Kaken! He yelled, the childhood name bubbling up from a deep, forgotten well of memory. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. His desperate, utterly selfless actions seemed to shame the heroes. It shamed someone else even more. From the edge of the crowd, a skeletal, emaciated man clutched his side, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Pathetic, Tashinori Yagi whispered to himself. Truly pathetic. He had been telling himself he was past his limit, that another hero would handle it. But watching this quirkless, courageous boy do what he, the symbol of peace, had hesitated to do, ignited a fire in his withered form. Boom! A shockwave of air pressure tore through the street. All Might, in his magnificent, muscle-bound form, had appeared as if from nowhere. I really am pathetic, he boomed, a single drop of blood tracing a line down his chin. He grabbed Izuku and Bakugo, pulling them free of the villain's grasp. But I must thank you, young man. You reminded me what it truly means to be a hero. His fist drew back. Detroit. Smash! The punch was a force of nature. It struck the sludge villain and atomized him, but its true power was in the control. The air pressure changed, the wind shifted, and suddenly, rain began to fall from a clear blue sky. He had literally changed the weather with a single punch. In the aftermath, Izuku was trembling, the adrenaline leaving him. He was immediately surrounded by the pro-heroes, who were scolding him for his recklessness, even as they checked him for injuries. Bakugo was being praised for his bravery and his powerful quirk. Izuku didn't listen. He simply sank to his knees, his mind replaying his own actions. He had disobeyed Diana. He had acted rashly. He had been a hero. Diana appeared at his side, her face unreadable. She helped him to his feet and quietly led him away from the scene, her protective presence a shield against the reporters who were now swarming All Might. The rooftop was quiet, a stark contrast to the noisy street below. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Izuku stood by the railing, staring out at the city, Diana a silent, watchful presence behind him. I am sorry, Izuku said, his voice low. I disobeyed a direct order. I was impulsive. It was not tactically sound. No, Diana replied, her voice soft. It was not. It was, however, profoundly heroic. You saw someone in need and you acted, not because you were ordered to, or because you thought you could win, but because it was the right thing to do. That is a lesson I cannot teach you, Izuku. You can only learn it here. She placed a hand on his chest, over his heart. I am not angry. I am proud. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes, a mixture of relief and residual shock. I am here! The voice was like a thunderclap. Both Izuku and Diana spun around. All Might, in his hero form, landed on the rooftop with a ground-shaking thud. Coming through the door like a normal person is overrated, he boomed, his signature smile fixed in place. He looked at Izuku, his expression one of deep admiration. Young man, I have come to thank you, and to apologize. You were the only one who acted today when the rest of us were paralyzed. You, a boy I was told is quirkless, showed more heroism than anyone on that street. Before Izuku could stammer out a reply, a huge cloud of steam erupted from All Might's body. When it cleared, the golden giant was gone, replaced by the skeletal man from the crowd. He coughed, wiping a fleck of blood from his lips. Izuku gasped. Diana's eyes widened slightly, her analytical gaze taking in the transformation, the grievous, starburst-shaped wound visible through his tattered shirt. The fading light. This is my true form. The man, Toshinori Yagi, said, his voice weak but firm. A nasty wound from a fight 5 years ago took my stomach and half my respiratory system. My time as a hero is down to about 3 hours a day. It's a secret I guard with my life. But I'm telling you this because you, young man, you are worthy. He looked Izuku dead in the eye. The heroes who scolded you, they were right, in a way. But I saw something else. On a field full of people with amazing powers, your quirkless legs moved first. There is a story, a legend really, that all the greatest heroes have in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. Izuku's breath hitched. Tears began to stream freely down his face. All his life, even on Themyscira, a small part of him had carried the weight of that doctor's diagnosis. You can't be a hero. Today, Toshinori said, his voice filled with a powerful emotion. Today, that was you. He pointed a long, bony finger at Izuku. You can become a hero. The words struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow. It was the validation he had yearned for his entire life, the blessing from the idol of his broken childhood. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing openly, a dam of emotion breaking after 14 long years. Diana stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Izuku's shoulder. She looked at Toshinori, not with awe, but with the measured gaze of one warrior assessing another. You are the one they call the symbol of peace, she stated. It was not a question. Toshinori nodded, his expression serious. I am. And you are. My name is Diana. I am his mother and his mentor. Toshinori's eyes widened. This woman carried herself with an aura of power and grace he had never encountered. It was not the crackling energy of a quirk, but something deeper, more ancient. Your son is a remarkable young man, Toshinori said respectfully. He is, Diana agreed. But he is not my son by birth. He was raised on my homeland, an island hidden from your world. He was trained in our ways. The courage you saw today was born of compassion, but it was forged in a decade of discipline. Toshinori listened intently, a look of dawning understanding on his face. This explained the boy's strange, almost classical movements, his tactical assessment of the situation even as he ran. I seek a successor, Toshinori said, getting to the heart of the matter. My quirk is not like others. It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next. It is called One for All. He explained the nature of the quirk, how it stockpiled power, growing stronger with each user, and how it could be willingly transferred. He told them of its nemesis, the great evil that had given him his wound, all for one. At that name, Diana's posture stiffened. The god of conflict, she murmured. The taker of gifts. You know of him? Toshinori asked, shocked. A prophecy led us here, Diana explained simply. It foretold of your fading light, and of his rising shadow. It told us that Izuku was to be the bridge. The pieces clicked into place. Fate. Destiny. Toshinori felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. He had not found this boy by accident. He looked down at Izuku, who had managed to compose himself and was listening with rapt attention, his analytical mind already dissecting the incredible information. Young man, Toshinori said, his voice ringing with purpose. I have been searching for someone with a true hero's heart, a vessel worthy of this great power. I believe that vessel is you. I want to give you my quirk. Izuku Midoriya, will you accept my power? Izuku stared, his mind blank for a full 10 seconds. This was impossible. It was a dream. The greatest hero in the world was offering him everything. He looked to Diana, his eyes asking the question he couldn't voice. She gave him a small, reassuring smile and a firm nod. This was his path. This was what they had come for. Izuku turned back to All Might, his face streaked with tears but his eyes burning with a resolve harder than any Amazonian steel. Yes, he breathed, his voice trembling but clear. Yes, I accept. The symbol of peace grinned, his true, skeletal face lighting up with a radiant hope. The son of Amazons, the quirkless boy who ran into danger, was about to become the inheritor of the greatest power the world had ever known. A new age was dawning. The 10 months that followed were a grueling, transformative, and occasionally baffling period of Izuku Midoriya's life. It all began on a stretch of coastline that had once been beautiful, but was now a tragic monument to the apathy of modern society. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It was a garbage dump masquerading as a beach. Mounds of illegally dumped trash, rusted appliances, and forgotten furniture formed small hills, choking the white sand and leaching filth into the turquoise water. The air was thick with the stench of salt and decay. It was here, at 5 in the morning, under a sky the color of a fresh bruise, that Izuku's new life was set to begin. Toshinori Yagi, in his skeletal form, stood beside an ancient, rust-eaten refrigerator, a determined look on his face. Diana stood a few paces away, her arms crossed, her expression one of serene neutrality. Izuku, dressed in simple training clothes, stood before his new mentor, practically vibrating with a mixture of excitement and reverence. "All right, young Midoriya," Toshinori declared, his voice thin but full of vigor. "You have accepted my power. But before we can complete the transfer, we must prepare your body. Your spirit is willing, but your flesh, while impressively conditioned, is still a mortal vessel. Pouring one for all into you now would be like pouring a gallon of gasoline into a teacup. Your limbs would pop right off." He gestured expansively at the junkyard beach. "So, your task is this. You have 10 months until the UA entrance exam. In that time, you will clean this entire beach. Every last piece of trash. This will be your gym, and this refuse will be your weights. It is a Herculean task, designed to push your body to its absolute limit, and beyond, forging it into a worthy receptacle for my power." He struck a pose, a shadow of his all-might form. "This is your path to heroism, my boy. A grueling, 10-month-long training montage from hell." Izuku's eyes shone with fiery determination. "Yes, sir. I understand. I will not fail you, All Might." He was ready to start that very second. Toshinori beamed, then turned to Diana for her approval. "A fine plan, is it not? Builds character and muscle." Diana's expression did not change. "It is direct," she said, her choice of word diplomatic but telling. She walked over to the refrigerator and placed a single, elegant hand on its rusted surface. "And fundamentally flawed," Toshinori's smile faltered. "Flawed? How so?" "This is the time-honored tradition of building a foundation of strength. You are training his body as if it were a simple machine, a container to be filled," Diana explained, her voice calm and instructional. "You are focused entirely on the hardware, with no thought for the software that will run it. One for all, from your own description, is not merely physical strength. It is a confluence of wills, a legacy of life force. To treat it as a brute force to be contained is to invite disaster." She turned to Izuku. "Tell me, my son, what is the first lesson of Amazonian combat?" Izuku answered without hesitation, his posture straightening. "That a warrior's greatest asset is not his strength, but his control. That power without wisdom is the tool of tyrants and fools." Diana nodded, then looked back at Toshinori. "Your plan would have him spend 10 months training his body to endure the power. My way would have him spend 10 months training his mind and spirit to command it. We will do both." Before Toshinori could fully process this, the moment of transference arrived. He plucked a single strand of his golden hair. "The final step," he said, a strange mix of solemnity and awkwardness on his face. "To inherit my power, you must consume some of my DNA. So," he held out the hair to Izuku. "Eat this." Izuku stared at the single strand of hair as if it were the key to the universe. His reverence for All Might was so absolute, so deeply ingrained, that he didn't even question the absurdity of the request. He took the hair with the gravity of a knight accepting a holy relic. "Thank you for this gift," he said with profound sincerity. Diana placed a gentle hand on his arm. Izuku. One moment. She looked at Tashinori. Is this truly the only way? There is no ritual? No invocation? Nope. Tashinori said cheerfully. Just gotta get my DNA in his system. It's a bit weird, I know, but it works. Diana sighed, a sound of immense, ageless patience. Very well. Izuku, do as he says. With a look of ecstatic determination, Izuku placed the hair in his mouth and swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. He blinked, looking down at his hands. Then, he felt it. It wasn't a rush of power. It wasn't an explosion. It was a single, infinitesimal spark deep within the core of his being, like the first star igniting in the void of a new universe. It was quiet, nascent, but it was there. A feeling of potential. An energy that was both foreign and somehow deeply familiar. I feel it, he whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. Excellent! Tashinori boomed. Now let's try a little test. Try and power up. Focus on that feeling, clench your butt cheeks, and yell smash from the bottom of your heart. Izuku's brow furrowed in concentration. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and focused on the spark. He felt it flicker, then grow. Red, crackling energy, like miniature lightning bolts, began to trace paths across his skin. He could feel a terrifying, exhilarating power welling up inside him, a raging ocean threatening to burst a dam. He pulled his fist back. Stop! Diana's voice was not loud, but it cut through his concentration like a razor. The red energy vanished. Izuku opened his eyes, startled. She stepped in front of him, her expression serious. You felt it, did you not? The power. It was like an untamed beast, fighting against your control. Izuku nodded, his heart still hammering. It was more than I could have ever imagined. It wanted to be released. All of it, exactly, Diana said. His method, this smash, is like trying to control a flood by opening the gates all at once. You may direct the initial torrent, but the resulting destruction is immense and indiscriminate. You would break yourself with every use. This is not control. This is a desperate release. She placed her fingertips on Izuku's forehead. We will not treat this power as a flood to be unleashed. We will treat it as a river. Your body is the riverbed. Your will is the current. We must teach the river to flow through you, to touch every part of you, without overflowing its banks. This power is not a weapon you hold in your fist, Izuku. It is a life force that must become as natural to you as your own blood. And so, the new training regimen began, a synthesis of two vastly different philosophies. The first month was dedicated almost entirely to meditation and control. Every morning, before the sun rose, Izuku would sit with Diana on the slowly clearing beach. Close your eyes, she would instruct. Do not try to call upon the power. Simply feel it. It resides within you now. A sleeping star. A coiled serpent. Find it. Acknowledge its presence. Let it know that you are its master, not its cage. At first, it was impossible. His mind, so accustomed to analysis and action, rebelled against the stillness. But under Diana's patient guidance, he slowly learned. He found the core of one for all within him. It was a blazing, chaotic sun of raw energy, a legacy of 8 lives' worth of power and will. It was terrifying. Do not fear it. Diana's voice would soothe him. It is a part of you. Extend your consciousness to it. Do not command it. Commune with it. Show it the pathways of your body. Let it trace your veins, your muscles, your bones. Let it learn the shape of its new home. He spent hours every day in this state. He began to visualize the power not as a singular, explosive core, but as a vast network of energy, a circulatory system of light that mirrored his own. He learned to draw upon an infinitesimal fraction of it, not even 1%, but a mere sliver, and guide it. He would channel it to the tips of his fingers, making them tingle with warmth. He would let it flow down to his toes. While Diana tutored his mind, Tashinori, initially skeptical, handled the physical regimen. The beach still needed to be cleared. But now, it wasn't just mindless labor. It was an exercise in applied control. All right, young Midoriya, Tashinori would say, pointing at a washing machine half buried in the sand. Your task is not just to lift it, but to lift it with precision. Use that tiny sliver of power Diana has you practicing with. Let it flow into your muscles not as an explosion, but as a reinforcement. Feel it augment your strength, not replace it. It was painstaking work. The first time Izuku tried, he miscalculated, sending a flicker of maybe 2% into his arms. The washing machine didn't just lift, it shot into the air as if fired from a catapult, landing with a deafening crash 50 yards away. Too much! Toshinori yelled, part panicked, part impressed. My apologies! Izuku gasped, staring at his trembling hands. But he learned. He learned to find the exact equilibrium. He would approach a massive, tangled pile of steel rebar, and instead of just heaving, he would take a meditative breath. He would draw that tiny, controlled stream of power, letting it flow through his entire body. His eyes would glow with a soft, emerald light, and faint green, lightning-like traceries would dance over his skin. He would then lift the rebar as if it weighed nothing, his movements fluid and efficient, and carry it to the disposal truck. Toshinori watched, his jaw often hanging open. The boy wasn't just getting stronger. He was developing a level of control over One for All that had taken Toshinori himself years to achieve, and he was doing it before he'd even thrown a single powered punch. He began to see the profound wisdom in Diana's methods. He's not just loading the power, Toshinori murmured to Diana one afternoon, as they watched Izuku effortlessly clear a section of the beach that would have taken a construction crew a week. He's harmonizing with it. He's making it his own. That is the goal, Diana replied simply. One for All is a legacy, but it cannot be wielded as a borrowed power. It must be fully integrated. He must become One for All, and it must become him. Months bled into one another. The beach, once a symbol of neglect, slowly began to reveal its pristine, white sand. Izuku's body, already at the peak of mortal conditioning, was further refined. He didn't grow bulky. He became denser, his muscles like tightly wound cables, his entire physiology adapting to the constant, low-level thrum of divine energy coursing through him. His combat training evolved as well. He would spar with Diana, his lariat in hand. At first, he would try to use One for All in bursts, attempting a powered-up strike or a super-speed dodge. Every time, Diana would neutralize him with effortless grace. In one memorable session, he managed to channel a full 5% into his fist, telegraphing a punch he thought would be unstoppable. Amazonian smash! He yelled, a hybrid of his two worlds. Diana didn't meet the blow. She simply shifted her weight, her hand catching his wrist, her body flowing with his momentum. She used the force of his own punch to spin him, guiding him into a perfect, disarming pancratian throw that sent him tumbling harmlessly into the sand. Brute force creates openings, she said, standing over him. Your opponent can feel its approach. They can see its trajectory. It is a predictable and inefficient application of overwhelming power. Now try again. But this time, do not try to smash. Try to flow. That was the breakthrough. Izuku finally understood. He stopped thinking of One for All as a power-up for specific moves. He started thinking of it as a constant state of being. He activated it at a sustained, manageable 1%, letting it course through his entire body continuously. The green traceries of light became a steady aura. His physical abilities were now permanently augmented. He was faster, stronger, more agile. It was a seamless enhancement, not a jarring explosion. He dubbed it full cowling. When he sparred with Diana in this state, the entire dynamic changed. He could now almost keep up with her mortal-level movements. His Amazonian combat forms, already perfected, were now amplified. A simple leg sweep carried the force of a battering ram. A defensive block could shatter a wooden practice sword. He moved like a blur of green lightning, his lariat a golden ribbon in the heart of the storm. Toshinori, now a full convert to Diana's methods, took on a new role. He became the storyteller, the keeper of the legacy. In the evenings, as they rested, he would tell Izuku stories of the previous users of One for All. Of Nana Shimura, his own beloved master, a woman with a hero's heart and a radiant smile. Of the others before her, each a link in a sacred chain, each adding their will and their strength to the flame Izuku now carried. This power isn't just a quirk, kid, Toshinori said, his expression more serious than Izuku had ever seen it. It's the crystallized hope of everyone who has fought against All for One and his darkness. It's a rebellion. When you use it, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting with all of them at your back. This resonated deeply with Izuku's Themysciran education. He wasn't just a warrior, he was the bearer of a sacred trust, a champion for those who came before. On the final morning, 10 months to the day after he had swallowed that strand of hair, the last piece of trash was removed. Izuku stood atop a mountain of compacted refuse on a disposal truck, his shirt off, his lean, powerful body silhouetted against the rising sun. He looked out at the beach. It was perfect. The sand was clean, the water was clear, and the sun glittered on its surface. He had not just prepared his body, he had healed a piece of the world. He let out a roar of triumph, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy and accomplishment that echoed across the water. Toshinori, in his all-might form, stood on the seawall, a tear trickling down his smiling face. He recorded a video on his phone, a message for his successor. The day of the UA entrance exam arrived. Izuku stood before the towering gates of the most prestigious hero academy in Japan. He was dressed in a simple, dark green version of his training clothes. Underneath, he wore the lightweight Amazonian cuirass. On his forearms, gleaming in the morning light, were the vambraces of Aegis. Coiled at his belt was his golden lariat. Diana placed a hand on his shoulder. She was not entering with him. This was a test he had to face alone. Remember your training, she said, her voice a calm anchor in the sea of nervous energy from the other applicants. You are not here to prove your power. You are here to prove your character. A hero protects. That is your first and only duty. The rest is secondary. Yes, mentor, he said, bowing his head. He looked up at her, a confident, determined smile on his face. I am ready. The written portion of the exam was, for Izuku, laughably easy. After a decade of studying philosophy, ancient languages, and advanced military strategy in the Great Library, high school-level questions in math, science, and literature felt like a relaxing puzzle. He finished with time to spare, using the remaining minutes to meditate and center himself for the practical exam. The real test began in a massive auditorium. The pro-hero present Mike was on stage, his energy at a deafening level. All right, examinees! Welcome to the main event! Are you ready? Silence. Tough crowd! He yelled undeterred. All right, here's the deal. You'll be heading into a full-scale urban replica for a 10-minute mock battle. You can bring whatever gear you want. Your job is to use your quirks to take out the villain bots you find. They come in 1, 2, and 3-point varieties. Your goal is to rack up as many points as you can. Izuku listened, his mind already processing the information, forming a strategy. Multiple enemy types, confined urban environment. Mobility and situational awareness will be key. And one more thing! Present Mike shouted, as a massive shadow fell over the screen behind him. There's a fourth type of bot. The zero-pointer. It's more of an obstacle. It's worth 0 points, so my advice? Run away. The examinees were divided and sent to their assigned battle centers. Izuku found himself at the gates of Battle Center B, stretching his limbs, his body thrumming with a low-level 1% of full cowling. He analyzed the other applicants. A boy with engines in his legs. A girl with pink skin and horns. They all radiated a nervous energy, sizing each other up. Izuku simply focused on his breathing, his expression serene. And start! Present Mick's voice boomed from unseen speakers. The other applicants looked confused. What's wrong? There's no countdown in a real fight. Before the hero could finish his sentence, Izuku was gone. He had exploded from the gate, a blur of green energy, leaving the others in his dust. That kid gets it! Go, go, go! Inside the city, Izuku was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. A 1-point robot rolled towards him. He didn't stop. He simply leaped, planting a foot on its head and using it as a springboard to launch himself onto a nearby fire escape, the robot's head crushing under the mild, OFA-enhanced force. 2 points, a voice in the observation room noted. He saw 2 3-pointers converging on a narrow street. He ran along the wall of a building, parallel to the ground, a feat of agility that defied gravity. He uncoiled his lariat, flicking it out. The golden rope wrapped around the leg of one robot, and Izuku pulled, using his momentum to swing around and trip it directly into the path of the other. The two machines crashed in a tangle of screeching metal. Izuku landed, touched both of them with his hand to deactivate them for the points, and was moving again before they had even finished falling. 9 points. In an observation room dark enough to be a movie theater, a group of pro-heroes watched the monitors, their faces illuminated by the glow. "This one in Battle Center B, the one with the green hair," a hero in a trench coat said. "He hasn't stopped moving since the exam began. His quirk seems to be a simple enhancement type, but his application is flawless. He's not just destroying them," said a woman with midnight black hair. "He's disabling them. Look there." On the screen, Izuku slid under the legs of a two-pointer, his hand trailing along the ground. He flicked his lariat upwards, wrapping it around the robot's single optic sensor. With a sharp tug, he ripped the sensor out. The robot flailed blindly and crashed into a wall. "That's 20 points," a small, bear-like creature in a suit said, a cheerful glint in his black eyes. "And he's barely broken a sweat. He fights with the precision of a surgeon, not the brute force of a brawler." Most impressive, Izuku's rampage continued. He was a force of nature, but a controlled one. He wasn't just looking for points. His senses, honed by Artemis, were on high alert. He heard a cry for help. A girl with purple hair and strange earphone jacks was cornered by two three-pointers. Before the robots could attack, Izuku descended from above, landing between them. He slammed his palms into the ground, channeling a 3% burst of OFA. The pavement cracked, creating a miniature shockwave that knocked the robots off balance. He then dispatched them with two swift, powerful kicks to their central processors. He turned to the girl. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, his voice calm. She stared stunned. Yeah? Thanks," he nodded once. "Be vigilant." And he was gone, scaling a wall to get a better vantage point. 38 points. He was a blur, a whisper of green lightning. He protected other examinees, disabled robots with surgical precision, and used his lariat and the environment as much as he used his fists. Then, the ground began to shake. A shadow fell over the entire city block. From behind a skyscraper, the zero-pointer rose to its full, terrifying height. It was colossal, bigger than any building in the testing area, a mountain of dark metal and glowing red optics. The other examinees had one unified reaction. They ran. "That's the zero-pointer! Run away! It's not worth any points!" Izuku, perched on a rooftop, watched the panic. His first instinct was tactical. Obstacle, not an enemy. Avoid and continue acquiring points. Then he heard the cry. "Help!" His eyes snapped to the source. A girl with brown hair and a round, friendly face was trapped. Her leg was pinned under a large piece of concrete, debris from the zero-pointer's emergence. The monstrous robot was lumbering directly towards her, its massive metal foot rising to take its next step, a step that would crush her into paste. There was no time for a plan. There was no room for hesitation. Diana's words echoed in his soul. A hero protects. He channeled one for all through his body, pushing it higher than he ever had in training. 5%. 7. The green energy around him roared to life, crackling with intensity. Full cowling, 10%! He roared, a name for a state he hadn't even known he could achieve. He bent his knees and leaped. He didn't just jump. He flew. He shot off the rooftop like a cannonball, a green comet soaring through the air, closing the 100-yard distance in a single, breathtaking bound. The sheer force of his takeoff shattered the concrete beneath his feet. In midair, he saw the robot's other arm swinging towards him, a hand the size of a bus ready to swat him out of the sky. He was still a dozen yards from the girl. He wouldn't make it. He flicked his wrist. The golden lariat shot out, a shimmering line against the sky. It wrapped around a protruding pipe on the robot's massive head. Izuku pulled. He didn't alter the robot's course, but it altered his. He swung in a wide, graceful arc, dodging the swatting hand, his trajectory now aimed perfectly at the robot's head. The girl, Achiko Uraraka, looked up, her eyes wide with terror and then awe, As the green lightning boy flew towards the mechanical god that was about to kill her, Izuku drew his fist back. He focused every ounce of One for All, the legacy of 8 heroes, the teachings of Diana, the hope of All Might, into that single point. This was not a desperate, bone-shattering release. This was a controlled, focused cataclysm. Themyscira. Smash! His fist connected with the robot's faceplate. The sound was not an explosion. It was a profound, deafening boom of impact. The metal of the robot's head buckled, caved, and tore. The head was thrown backwards with incredible force, the neck joints shearing. The colossal machine, its optic sensor extinguished, staggered and began to fall, backwards, away from the trapped girl. The recoil sent Izuku tumbling through the air, his arms screaming in protest but not broken. He was still too high up. He was going to fall. Suddenly, he felt a light tap on his back, and the terrifying sensation of falling was replaced by a gentle weightlessness. He floated down to the ground as softly as a leaf. Uraraka, having pushed herself free, had slapped him with her zero-gravity quirk. She then promptly threw up from the exertion. "Time's up!" Present Mick's voice roared. The exam was over. Izuku landed, the power receding. He rushed to Uraraka's side, ignoring the searing pain in his arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. "I should be asking you that," she managed to say, looking at his reddened, steaming arm. "That was incredible." The other examinees stared at him, their jaws on the floor. He hadn't just faced the zero-pointer. He hadn't just destroyed it. He had done it to save someone, with a display of power and grace that seemed utterly impossible. In the observation room, the pro-heroes were silent, stunned. Did you see that leap?" one of them whispered. "The mid-air course correction with that rope. Who is this kid?" Midnight breathed. All Might, in a different room, swelled with pride, coughing a bit of blood into his hand. Mizu, the principal, just sipped his tea, a wide, knowing smile on his furry face. "Well," he said cheerfully, "I think we've found something quite special." He looked at the scoreboard. "And let's not forget about the rescue points." A week later, a projection of All Might appeared in Izuku's small apartment. He informed him that he had passed with flying colors. "You scored 45 villain points, an incredible achievement on its own." All Might boomed. "But that wasn't the whole story. The true test of a hero is their willingness to risk everything for others. For your selfless, spectacular rescue of that young lady, you were awarded 60 rescue points." He pointed dramatically. "With a total of 105 points, you not only passed, Izuku Midoriya, you shattered the all-time record. Welcome, my boy, to your hero academia." Izuku sat in stunned silence, the projector flickering off. Diana placed a proud hand on his shoulder. He had done it. He had taken the power of gods and men, the philosophies of 2 worlds, and he had proven himself. His journey was just beginning.